I'm Head of Design at Ableton, and I'll be talking about not having ideas or making ideas, but the messy bit in the middle where you have to talk about your own other people's ideas.
Who's heard of Ableton here? Just okay. Who uses any of our products? Cool. All right. So I'm not starting completely from scratch. So for those of you who don't know, Ableton, we make software and hardware for making music, and depending on your point of view, we've either sort of brought music culture and music making forward, or we've ruined it. But maybe a simple explanation is if you see a laptop on stage and it's not a DJ, then there's a fairly good chance that that laptop is running our software. And I guess I'll run you through a few facts about us as a company that might be interesting, sort of in the realms of the topic here. And the first is that I would consider us to be productively dysfunctional. Or dysfunctionally productive, however you want to see it. And by that I mean we get stuff done, and I feel very privileged to be able to stand here and speak about work that I didn't do on my own, but sort of 230 colleagues also contributed to. But whilst the results can be very impressive, we often sort of don't know how it actually happened and have trouble working out how to do it next time. So that means take what I'm saying here with a grain of salt, because your mileage may vary, but also that we appreciate discussions like this about how we work, because it gives us a chance to test how we think and see what other people think in comparison. So when it comes to Ableton, our work lies at the intersection of two worlds, sort of one very old one, which is the world of music and art and human expression and emotion, and another one which is a very new world, which is the world of computers, software and networks. And the intersection of these two worlds is a really interesting place. That's why we love what we do. And it means that there's heaps and heaps of ideas that we can make. But the reality of, let's say, real-world resources means that the ones that we actually do make is much less than the ideas that we have. And what we end up making can often be sort of complex, multifaceted things, not just a single idea, rather an amalgam of many, many, many ideas. And this can kind of start to get overwhelming. And so our challenge is really to try and pull this back down into something simple that appears very, very easy and very focused and very human for the people that use our products. So described another way, what we're trying to do is take all of the ideas and thinking of not just the 240 or so people that work at Ableton, but also all of our users and other people, and channel it down into just two products and one technology, which is Link. And so I think, I guess what I can say there is we deal a lot with ideas, both practically and abstractly at our work, and we do so with in sort of quantity and with a lot of passion. And so what I thought it would be interesting to talk about here is some of the things that we've learnt about dealing with ideas. So not having ideas, not turning ideas into things, but the sort of the messy bit in the middle where you're talking about your ideas. Whilst some of these are things that we've learned, some of them are things that we're still learning, and some of them I think are things that bear reaffirming whether you know them or not. And so where I'd like to start is with your ideas. And when you have ideas, often the challenging part is explaining them to people and having people understand your ideas in some way, because they often seem quite clear to you, but other people don't necessarily get the picture quite so quickly. And I'm a designer, and I get the impression that quite a few other people here are as well, and so our first instincts can often be to visualize. But I think with ideas there are also a few other ways that can be interesting when you want to get your point across, and I wanted to talk about a few of those. And so one of those is metaphor. And live, for a long time, has been encapsulated by a metaphor of thinking of it as an instrument, or a sequencing instrument, I think they originally called it. And that's interesting because in our industry, if you look at this picture, a lot of people would seek metaphors on the right-hand side of the picture for their software. So they think of it as a mixing desk or a tape machine. And we tend to look more on the left-hand side, so we think of it as an instrument. And this has not just been useful to us for communicating the idea amongst ourselves and to other people, but also for then developing the idea. So it has helped us guide and define how the product actually works. So things like the importance of it being a real-time thing, the amount of effort that we expect people to invest in it, the way that it's all on one screen, there's no overlapping windows, or even down to developing a hardware API for hardware to integrate with this. A lot of this stems from this idea of thinking of live as an instrument rather than a tape machine or as computerized sheet music. It also then helped us when we wanted to expand into hardware with Push, because Push is a weird thing. It's a combination of a whole bunch of different ideas, like the pads of an MPC, the grid layout of an accordion, all sorts of things. So, and it would look quite different if we thought of it, if we thought of live as a mixer or as a tape machine. And so thinking of live as an instrument kind of guided the development of this idea and gave us something to wrap up all the other little weird ideas inside it into some sort of coherent whole, we hope. It also helped us when we were thinking of Link, because Link in the beginning was a piece of technology that solved a problem that had been a bit of a pain in the ass in a much nicer way. So getting different bits of software on different machines to play in perfect sync at the same tempo. But when designing a product, it's not necessarily helpful to take the technical perspective and think of this as different machines that are trying to synchronize each other. And so if you take the metaphor of the instrument and you extend it, what we did was we thought of these are people with instruments trying to behave like they're in a band. And actually, one of the guiding points when we were thinking about Link was the motivation for doing it is someone with a computer running live can do really cool things, but the moment they're in a band with other instruments, the person with the computer kind of feels like the shittest person in the band. And sort of you have to stop and be like, wait, what tempo are we? And so this is the first step, and we hope not the last step, of trying to let people with computers that they see as their instrument stand on an equal footing with other people in a band. Another tool that just to recap. So metaphors can be handy because they let you use existing knowledge to quickly understand or explore new ideas. They also point you in the direction of more ideas, and they help you imagine how people will behave with your idea. So they let you very quickly traverse things like this. Another thing we like to use is stories. We're a fan of comic books, and this comic was written to help guide the ideas for Push 2, and it was known affectionately as the old-fashioned scenario for obvious reasons. But it helped us really push the different ideas inside of Push around and see how they fit together into a narrative, to see where there were gaps and to see what this actually means for a person. Because looking at features in isolation on a product, you don't necessarily see these details or see the big picture sometimes. Another thing that we like to do in terms of storytelling is make fake websites for products that we can't share with people because the products aren't released yet. But I think you can see it's a website, you can see from navigation up there. You get the general idea, but this is the same thing. Like, you realize that when you're explaining something as you would to a customer or an end user, you explain it in a very different way to how you would with your colleagues. And sometimes actually they understand it much better if you treat them like they're a customer rather than a colleague. And so we actually sometimes use these also to communicate internally about what we're trying to do. You know, you share backlogs or wiki pages with people and they're like, you're building a what now? And then you share something like this and they're like, okay, I get it. So stories are handy because they help you imagine things in context, in a narrative where there are human characters. They also let you see how it fits together and let you find gaps. But the main thing that any of these ideas or other ones help when it comes to sharing your ideas is that it lets it exist outside of your own head. And this is important, whether you're writing it down, drawing a picture, using metaphors, making stories, whatever. I think it's really important to get ideas out of your own head because they sometimes look very different once they leave your head than they did inside. Like your brain lies to you sometimes. I describe this as the difference between having a good idea and having the feeling that you have a good idea. And often in my experience, I was just having the feeling of having a good idea and then I put it down on paper for someone else to look at. And you don't even need to show it to the other person. You can't actually even get the idea out on paper and you're like, my brain was bullshitting me. But that's actually the other part of it that's valuable because it does draw other people into it. And when two people can look at an idea at the same time, or three people, that's when they really start to develop and become powerful. And so let's switch to other people's ideas. And the first important thought when thinking or when dealing with other people's ideas is you need to understand why it is that you're looking at someone else's idea in the first place. You need to understand what that other person needs from showing you the idea. Otherwise, you won't be able to do a very good job of helping them or working with them. So I have a colleague, Jack, who's made me really think about this lately. So he's working on a project that's it's an idea that's not out there yet, but it's a very exciting one. And there's a lot of people at Ableton that are interested in it, and they want to talk to him and the other people that he's working with about it. And he's experienced something that he's described as almost becoming a meme for people in this situation at Ableton, which is, did you think of? And people have good intentions when they take this kind of approach, when you show them something. But what Jack made me realize is what they actually think they're saying is, how can I help? But that's not what they're saying. And this is, I think, what we should all be thinking when someone shows us an idea. Not, did you think of, or I was wondering if, but like, how can I help? You've got an idea, you want to go somewhere with this, what can I do to help? And I mean, if you're in a team, the assumption should be that you want to help them see if that idea is a good one, and see if it can do something positive for the domain that you're working in. But we often jump ahead a little bit from how can I help to, wait a minute, I've worked out how I can help you already. And I think part of that is, at least in the domain where I work, many of us are designers or engineers, and we've had it drummed into us for quite a long time that our profession and our business is problem solving. And so we jump straight to finding problems and pointing them out and then starting to try and solve them. But that's not always what the person who's showing you an idea needs. And I think it's important to make sure that it's not about you when you're talking to people about ideas. Another thing that's kind of a part of this, that you get this reaction when you see an idea or when you show someone an idea. And again, they were trying to help. They were trying to stop you wasting your time from going down a road that they see ending in a place that's not helpful. But the problem is that ideas aren't always just additive. Sometimes they multiply as well. And sometimes good ideas, the path to them lies through bad ideas. And you need to be careful with this phrase, because this ends the conversation about the idea that you're having. What works much better, and maybe you've all heard this, is yes and. That gives you a chance to build on the idea and see where it goes. And this idea of withholding judgment allows you to have many ideas and see the different combinations that they can arrange themselves in. And it's also important because ideas are super fragile, and you kind of need to keep them alive for a while to understand them. And the first phrase there kills them in many cases. Another thing that I think is important is to allow yourself to be human. And what I mean by this is we're all imperfect, kind of irrational, often emotional individuals looking at the world from the spot that we stand in from inside our own heads. And I've noticed in recent years, there's a lot of pressure for design to become a very rational, very scientific profession. And I think this kind of denies our own humanity a little bit. I think we're much better off acknowledging the fact that our position is subjective, and then understanding why we have the position that we have compared to someone else. Because I think that helps, and I have an example of why. So a lot of responses to things that people put out kind of look like this, and I've experienced my fair share of it's shit in my designing lifetime. I don't know what that says about me as a designer. But at some point I realized I hadn't put out a single piece of work like outside of university that someone hadn't responded to by calling for me to be fired. And this sentiment pops up, and people throw it around really easily. And when we launched the website for Live 9 at Ableton, that was part of a big rebrand, and I'd worked on both the rebrand and the website, and it was 18 months of work, and it was an idea that's sort of been around for 3 years. And we shipped it, and a bunch of people were like, that's shit. How could you have made something that shit? I thought you knew what you were doing. And understandably, that bummed me out a little bit. One of our founders, Bount, noticed that I was a bit bummed out about it, and he had a really good thought on it. And what he said to me was, first, make note of how many people are actually saying it's shit compared to the amount of people that are using it, because it's a small portion. But the other thing he said is, and I think he's right, is that people find it really hard to say, I don't like it. And that's different to it being shit. I'd like to stress that. I really don't think it was shit. But people tend to take their opinion and express that as a judgment of a thing. And I think we're best to step back from that wherever we can and sort of say I don't like it and think about why we don't like it. And the important thing about saying I don't like it is it then opens things up to the idea that someone else can like it, and that's okay. And this is important because acknowledging that other valid perspectives exist on things is the first step towards empathy. And empathy is really important if you're designing things for people. And it's also very important if you're working with people. Being able to understand and empathize with people you're working with is a huge part of collaboration. And like I said, collaboration is something that can make ideas very powerful. And the last point I wanted to hit on, which I think is important, and this is a concept that we at Ableton were introduced to by a chap called Jeff Patton, which is making a distinction when working on things between discovery and delivery. And this is described by other people as like definition and execution, whatever. But the important thing is distinguishing between whether you're trying to learn about an idea, so whether you're trying to find out about an idea, trying to find out more ideas, trying to reduce the amount of ideas you have, or whether you're delivering, whether you're actually trying to take that idea and turn it into something. And the difference between these two mindsets can mean radically different approaches for designers, engineers, whoever's working on things. And a lot of the tension I see when people are talking about ideas is someone's trying to explore and discover an idea, and someone else is thinking like they've got to deliver that thing next week, and they're trying to kill everything that's going to be a problem. And these two things don't work well together. So it's really helpful if everyone that's engaging with an idea understands, like I said at the beginning, to what end you're engaging with the idea. And so I wasn't planning to talk about actually delivering ideas, but there's maybe one or 2 points I'd like to make. And one is that at Ableton we didn't ship that. We also didn't ship that, or that, or many, many other ones that never even got far enough for us to give a name that I then needed to blank out. And what I'm saying here is that, I guess, in most cases from the outside you only see the ideas that happen, not the many, many, many other ones that didn't. And also that results in, I just blanked that out because I couldn't be bothered to calculate it. Huge amounts of people's work, and it was absolutely the right thing to do to spend that time working on ideas that never became anything. And this is challenging, and this is why trust and care is important. Like, you really need to trust each other when you're working on ideas, because they are fragile, and so that means you need to let them live to find out what they can be. But that doesn't mean all of them need to live. And some of them will die on their own. Some of them might need to be killed with fire. But you need to see what they are first, and knowing that you can end them and you can decide not to ship things is what lets you explore ideas and lets you find the most interesting ones. So there's a balance there that we all really need to be careful of. Thank you very much.